Welcome back to Conversations with Shawn and Anthony. Anthony is having some technical difficulties and will be with us shortly. In today's episode, we explore labels and how, while they may be practical, they may also become our greatest limitations. So, without further ado, enjoy today's episode.
A lot of things have been on my mind.
Okay.
Coming to Sedona puts you in a space of having to do a lot of reflecting, I guess, and being open to a lot of different viewpoints of what a spiritual journey might consist of. So, so with that, I've been learning a lot of lessons, how to um, how to absorb information,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, well, how to absorb information and not let that information become uh, your touchstone, so to speak, to not lose who you are, who I am, to not lose who I am fundamentally, because a lot of new information is being thrown at me from a spiritual realm.
That's really interesting. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I can. I can elaborate on that. And, that what I love about this thing that we're doing is that it's about having open, honest, direct conversation. And in that, I have to also look at myself and be very open, honest, and where I am. So, um, to elaborate on that, I will first talk about the fact that I have a tendency to be very swayed by people,
Mm-hmm.
to be swayed by people's philosophies or belief systems, because, as we've talked about before, I always try to be the nice guy. And so
Right.
try not to be conflicting, or to raise doubts about somebody else's belief system. And that's probably a key word right there, is raising doubts. So I'll get back to that. Um, when you have a fundamental core belief system, and if you really truly believe in that, and that doesn't matter what it is,
Mm-hmm.
you can have a belief system that's based on satanic rituals. You could have a belief system that's based on Jesus Christ. You could have a belief system that's based on Buddhism. There are
Right.
just so many different layers out there. Um, we have a tendency as human beings to surround ourselves with people that have the same belief systems that we do, because that puts us in a group. We're a part of the clan. We're a part of a support system that can forever give us that pat on the back that we need, or the uh, confidence to know that we're doing the right thing because everybody else in our midst is doing the same thing.
It's
So
almost it's almost like as human beings we have this strong desire for certainty and we'll attach ourselves to a belief system in order to feel a sense of that, even though the reality is there's no such thing as certainty in this life.
right,
I wanted to
okay,
read something, and I wanted
please.
to read this prior to hearing what you had to say this morning.
Okay.
Any framework, method, or label that you impose on yourself, and this goes for others too, is just as likely to be a limitation as it is to be an opening. Talk amongst
Okay.
yourselves.
Where did you find that?
I'm reading this book that I've been dying to read. It's by the music producer Rick Rubin. I was really looking forward to reading a book from
Mhm.
him that was not about his famous life and the artists that he's worked with, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Lady Gaga. And I didn't want to read that. I wanted to understand his
Mhm.
creative process. And he actually wrote a fantastic book on just that. It's not at all about his fame,
Oh, wow.
it's about his process. And
Right,
that's his quote.
right. Can you reread that?
I sure
Reread that,
can.
do you mind? I think it's a very important line there.
Any framework, method, or label you impose on yourself is just as likely to be a limitation as an opening. And we could look at anything from the label of Buddhist, Christian, artist, designer, carnivore, like meat eater versus vegan, just as likely to be an opening as it is to be a limitation. Think of any label. I've been thinking a lot about labels.
Right. Yeah, so the labels, and I'm going to go back to the spiritual journey here that I'm doing here, and being in an environment where people have belief systems of spirituality, and in a place like that, it's not really necessarily based on Christianity or a specific religion. It's more based on an ethereal kind of concept of maybe past lives, or of living, coming from another planet, coming from another star system. It's a lot about getting in touch with yourself from a different perspective, not necessarily based upon the teachings of the big book.
Can I say something?
Even with,
can I say something to that?
Yeah.
I really do embrace spirituality, but that word really, what does that word even mean?
Right.
But it's fascinating because when you leave things like Christianity and you leave things like Buddhism and you become spiritual, all of these elements can be tainted with your ego.
Yes.
Because the ego wants an identity. The ego says, tell me who I am so I can tell the world who I am. And I'm the spiritual person. I wear beads and you know what I mean? Like, I do all the things that the idea of the spiritual person is. And in that, you kind of lose the spirituality. I'm just saying that can be a trap that any of us can fall into, me included.
Well, you're absolutely right. So, one of the things that, and you know me so well, and one of the things I've always identified is I use this label and identified myself as being Buddhist because I could not understand Christianity or anything like that. And then as years have gone by, I've had to redefine that because, putting a name on something is great because it makes it easy to have a conversation.
Right.
It's practical. To go, oh, I'm Buddhist. And it's a practical thing, but here's the problem. This is the problem that I discovered, is that I am not a study kind of person. I'm not the person who's going to go in and delve into something and go, oh my God, and now it's this and it's all this. But one of the problems that I realized is that I would tell people that I'm Buddhist and they'd start talking to me about things that I had no fucking idea what they were talking about. So I felt like I was living.
That's so interesting though, because you shouldn't have to study so if something is the definitive truth, right? And I love elements of Buddhism. I do. I will never call myself a Buddhist, but I do practice elements of Buddhism. But if something is a definitive truth, you should not have to study a book. You should arrive there on your own. Where I arrive should be the same point that you arrive in reading a book, because just because you understand a theory doesn't mean you understand it in practice. I know a lot of intelligent people that can parrot what's in a book, but when you watch them interact with the world, my gosh, you see quite the opposite of what they, proclaim to be the ultimate truth.
You're cutting out. So I don't know if I'm losing, if I have a bad connection.
You're good now.
But yes, I agree with you. So what I was going to get back to saying was about the whole philosophy of what an organized religion is, and including Buddhism or anything.
Yeah.
Is that, as you said before, if you go into something and you put that label on it, you are now putting limitations on it. So as wonderful as it is to go, oh, I'm this or that or whatever, and all these doors open up for you that maybe you didn't have opened up to before, there's also limitations within that scope. Because like I just said, I would get in a conversation with somebody who was a practicing Buddhist,
Right.
and they start grilling me about things. And I go, God, I really have no idea, nor do I want to, because I have a strong sense already, like you just said, there are parts of Buddhism or any religion or belief system that I can pull into my life and apply them into my scope, and that works for me. Now, is that limiting? It could be also viewed as being limited, because people would go, well, then you're not really delving in and you're really not getting the knowledge of what the Buddha practiced, or what Jesus Christ did and dying on the cross, or whatever it may be. But I come from a belief system that we are all everything, that everything is already here within us, and I don't need to have somebody telling me what I'm supposed to believe. It is lovely to be to have something opened up to you that maybe will help you in your quest of discipline. So if discipline means that, if it, and again, we're not here to put it
No.
the spirituality they believe in, but if you open up the door to go into whatever realm that is, and there's a practicality that can be applied of, again, discipline and practice, then so be it. I think that's a great thing to do. So, i.e., say your goal is to meditate, okay? And there are so many different variables out there of what is the right meditation practice.
But again, that's
okay?
ego. But that's ego. To
Right.
say
So
that
I've
this
gone
is
down
my
that.
way, therefore this is the right way. There's a chapter in
Right.
here where he talks about the limitations of going into a new project, right? And you learned how to do something one way and it worked. And attempting
Right.
to bring that into every single project you work on versus having that beginner's mind, because there really is no such thing as the one way that works.
Right. And yet you're absolutely right. So in this realm that I'm in this space that I'm at right now in Sedona, where there is there's the energy vortex, etc. There is also a lot of ego attached to a lot of people who are in this space, because they are looking. What I have found is that they are looking for somebody to validate their story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So they have a belief system, and they may believe whatever it may be. I'm not going to pinpoint it because I don't want to call anybody out
I know.
directly on their belief system, but they may believe in something. So what they will tend to do, and I've noticed this a lot in this space, is that they will seek out people who will validate that belief system. And if they don't validate the belief system, then that person wasn't any good at what they were doing. They don't know. And then they'll go and find keep seeking somebody else to validate their belief system.
Can I share something with
Right?
you?
Sure.
When I started doing the work that you and I did together, and just our relationship in general, um, it was really important for me to do things that people weren't validating, because, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm only talking about my personal journey. I'm not judging anybody for how they're navigating this world. I'm learning how to navigate it just like any other human being on the planet. So, with that being
Right.
said, I see the dangers in chasing validation. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm very cautious when I find myself, somebody gives me a compliment or support something that I'm doing. Not that I'm one of those people that just wants to like deny any, applause or compliments, but it's really important to me that I am the one validating myself, because if I'm not validating what I'm doing, I don't care how many compliments I get around the thing I'm doing. I'm
Right.
losing myself in the world.
Right. So you're right. That validation. So the validation, that's a kind of like a basic core human uh thing that we are seeking validation.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I totally get that.
I could go
And
off,
you're
like, I
right.
could go off my diet. Let me give you an example, because I don't, like, I'm that person that actually has stuck to it. That's me.
Right.
We're different.
Right.
But if I were to go off of it because something stressful in my life happens, how easy would it be for me to go out in the world and get validation? Oh my God, you poor thing. Of course you did. Look what you're going through.
Right.
But me personally would not respect that.
Right.
And I'm really okay. So right now I'm just really fascinated in this idea or this point in my life of I am my own guru.
Hmm.
I'm not I'm not looking for anyone else to have the answers for Shawn. Nobody can have the answers for Shawn. It's not
Right.
possible.
Right.
Shit, I'm still figuring it out. So there's no way in hell anybody who doesn't live in this body can figure it out for me.
Right. Well, Shawn, so validation, and it's interesting, this reminds me of a conversation that I had this past year
Uh-huh.
that had to do with a personal relationship of somebody who, well, let's all be honest with you. Let's not do bullshit around the bush here. People know this anyway. But my partner and I, Bart, we had a struggle. We had a conflict.
Uh-huh.
Where I had discovered that he was uh engaging in activities that were tied to the gay social media apps like Scruff or Grindr or whatever they are. And I, it's interesting
Uh-huh.
how I have my own belief system of what a
Right.
relationship was
Should
supposed
be.
to be. So I had built a box around what that relationship is. And in building the box, what I had also done was I had put a huge amount of limitations on my partner. And my belief, my belief was I'm enough. I should be enough for you. You shouldn't have to go out and look for other people to validate you. Okay. So, and this is what I learned in this process of delving into it. Number one was that just because I thought one way doesn't mean that he thought that way or that the
Right.
rest of the world thought that way. Just because I thought, oh, I am in a relationship, so therefore this is the way it's supposed to be. Well, in his world, it was so not that. It was so not that at all. But through the
So
process of
what label
delving
are we dealing with here? You had your ideas of what monogamy
monogamy
is supposed
or
to
what a
be.
relationship
And what,
is,
well, yeah, a relationship is supposed to be because you're born into this very, um, gosh, what's the right word for it? I mean, we're kind of a prudish society. So you're
right?
born into this world and you watch movies and you listen and you maybe you look up to parental figures and you learn what a relationship is supposed to be. And
To
anything
be
outside of that equals rejection. You're not good enough. You know,
right,
obviously you blew it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to go get it somewhere else. And if you
right,
study the history of monogamy, you realize that we made it up
right,
and then we decided this is now how we're supposed to operate, and it
right,
causes so many conflicts in
right.
relationships that don't necessarily have to exist.
Exactly. So in this process of learning, so my first reaction when this all came about and I found out that my partner was engaging in outside activities, I, of course, went into the heterosexual woman role of, "Oh, how dare you?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the whole thing of like, this is so traumatic. And I just went full tilt. And then I, at one point, realized that this was not healthy, that this was not a healthy way to approach this, that I needed to first off, if I was having a problem, it was my problem. So therefore, I need to do something about it. So I sought out a therapist.
Uh-huh.
And I purposely sought out a therapist who was a therapist to gay men. Okay. And that's something that I had never done before. In fact, I'd avoided therapy from anybody who was considered in the gay world, right? Because it just didn't suit my vision of myself, right? Well, the problem with that is that I would go to a heterosexual therapist who would give me the heterosexual cookie
The
cutter
box.
idea of what a
How
relationship is
dare
supposed to
he?
be.
How dare he do that
Right.
to
So they would
you?
validate, right. And they would validate my belief and go, he's so
Yes.
wrong. He's so bad. And then I found the gay therapist who, of course, listened to my poor me. And I'm just so devastated. And how could this happen to me? And then he said, you know what? uh, I think that maybe you need to relook at what you have put as parameters as a relationship is because you are actually not the norm.
Oh my God, that's
You
so
are
funny.
so not the normal because that's not how it works. Understand that in gay relationships, number one, they're not heterosexual relationships, and gay people were forced by their parents, their upbringing, that you're supposed to be this certain thing. And so what happened for a lot of gay people and a lot of gay men, I think I'll speak for gay men because I'm not a gay woman, gay men, is that when they escaped those bounds of being in their home environment, their hometown, and that's why gay men run to big cities, is because they need to get away from that. And all of a sudden, all of those things started to peel away.
Yeah.
And all of those social norms that they thought they were supposed to live, it just was not existent. Okay. And what I learned, was I needed to start listening. I needed to start listening to my partner and not put judgments upon him based upon my upbringing and my ingrained philosophy, but instead to listen to a different point of view. And it didn't happen right away, Shawn. It was a good 6 months, a year of really having to fight it because I didn't want to go there. And then one day, Bart and I sat down and had a conversation. And Bart said to me, he said, look, it's not about not caring and loving you. This is about me. This has nothing to do with you. I will not do that if it really makes you that upset. We can come to a conclusion and agreement that's what I will do. And when he said that, I realized, I thought, if I were to say, great, oh my God, I won. He's
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that anymore. What was I actually doing? I was actually setting up parameters of my relationship to be with a partner who was never going to be fulfilled or happy. And what I learned also, when we go back to the term of validation, one of the things that I learned with him, and you and I are very, we create our own validation in many respects. We do it, we do that. We do that. But a lot of people don't, and my partner was one. He didn't have a platform where people would come and say, oh, you're this and you're that and you're great. And that's ego. That's the ego part, right? And what he was getting and what he gets from these outside sources of, even if it's just a compliment on a Scruff app, is validation. And I
Yeah, I
was
mean,
taking that away from.
it can be that, but you know, being homo, again, we're throwing another label on it, but being homosexual, gay, whatever, I'm bisexual in the sense that I'm attracted to both men and women. Like I
Yeah,
don't
me
really
too.
give a shit about the label at the end of the day. I really don't. But the interesting thing about when you are born into the world and you do not fit neatly into the box in a beautiful way, even though it can be painful in the beginning because it feels like you don't fit into anything, you're forced to question all the assumptions that people never question. I mean, heterosexual couples experience misery and pain because
Right.
they don't understand and they've never been forced to embrace it. There's a difference between intimacy and sex.
Mm-hmm.
Sex does not have to equal intimacy. The two
Right.
can coexist together, but
Right.
sex is sex.
Right. It's a
You
physical
know?
activity. Like, yeah.
And it's enjoyable and it's not pathological to want to explore that because, okay, I'm going to use an analogy that you might not appreciate. But it's kind of like there's an author of a book that just blew my mind open on all of this. And I'm like, why have I been trying to fit into this box for so long? It doesn't even make sense how we got here. You really
Right.
question it. It's really not natural to us as human beings. I respect you if you practice monogamy. I respect it. But just because you become a vegan doesn't mean bacon stops smelling good. Makes sense.
Right.
Because we do have carnivore roots.
Right. Right.
So it's okay to make that decision, but don't be surprised when someone starts, sniffing and seeking out the bacon.
Right.
That's
Well,
ingrained. It's not a knock on you. And yeah, I guess it could be validation, or it could just be that, hey, I'm a human being and I enjoy sex.
well, so what I had to learn, Shawn, with when my partner said the things that he said to me, I had to take a step back and lose my judgment. I just
Yeah.
take a step back and lose my judgment. And then one day I finally had the balls to say to him, after I processed this, I finally said, look, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this, because what happened was, when I became okay with it, I actually opened up the door for myself to
Yeah.
then go and explore my own desires, and maybe explore something that I never allowed myself to explore before, because I had set up my own parameters on this. And then I had to ask, or actually my therapist said to me, so what happened to all those relationships that you had? And I said, well, they all ended. He said, why did they end? And I said, because they cheated on me.
That's so funny.
And when he said that, I was like, okay. So maybe I'm the one that needs to reevaluate. And what I did is I did reevaluate, Shawn. So I reevaluated. And when I was honest enough about it, I opened up the door to my partner and I said, look, I'm okay with this. I freed myself. I freed myself to allow myself to actually become a human being who had desires, who is interested in other people, who's looking at other people and going, yeah, that's something that I might want to do. And when I did that, and I was honest enough with my partner was honest enough to say to me, thank you. It doesn't mean that that's what I want to do, but it's nice to know that we are at a place where we can agree that it's not going to destroy our relationship if we go off and do something else alone.
Esther
And that,
Perel. Esther Perel has a great TED talk on that, and she explores infidelity through a new lens, and it's about using infidelity to become closer and stronger as a couple versus to divide.
divide, right?
Yeah, because this happens. You just don't hear about it. It
Right,
happens
exactly.
all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? I have to be honest with you. Like, Bart and I were my partner and I said, Bart, we travel a lot. And I started to realize, it's like, and we don't travel together.
Right.
Like, why am I saying to my partner that he should not enjoy his life? He's a 63-year-old man. He should be able to go and enjoy every experience and every opportunity that presents himself if he chooses to take them. And so should I.
So should you. Now, you just said something really interesting to me, because what you're saying is, and we've visited this before in the past in conversation, but what you're saying is, when you judge another, really what you're doing is putting yourself into a cage.
Mm-hmm.
Very little impact on the other. It has much greater impact on you. And that
Right.
goes to when I started hanging out with you, and all of a sudden I'm a whore, I'm a slut, I'm a cunt. So all, like, yeah, think of the worst names, but that's their prison. I'm
Right.
free.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm free
Well,
to be all these things and be totally comfortable with myself.
right. Well,
But
so
it
I'm gonna
wasn't until then. So like
right.
that 8 years ago, I broke out of jail.
And it's interesting because and you know me well enough to know you do something and you're like full on done, got it done. This is my thing, this is where I'm going. Me, I will do those things, then go, ooh, I'm getting too far into it. I better step back because somebody's gonna get mad at me. So I need to have people like you in my life who support that side of me, not only to have the people that support that other side of me, because they're all important, but it's really important to have those people in your life that encourage you. It's not bad behavior, it's truth.
Look,
Live your truth.
unless you're like Shawn, I'm gonna blow my brains out, which I might intervene in that situation.
Right, right.
like like Anthony, I kind of like you, maybe not do that. But
That's
outside of
not
those
the
things,
day.
and as long as you're not hurting anybody else, it's so funny when I love our relationship because it's taught me so much about the world. Like when we started hanging out, I know you get this too about me. It's like you have people reaching out to you like, you gonna let Anthony do that?
Right,
He's a grown man. You,
right,
you want me to give him a spanking?
right. That anybody even would say that blows my mind.
I don't want to tell him I'm not his mommy, and I don't want
Right,
to be.
right,
Nor do I want
exactly.
him telling me to stop being so nerdy or scientific or any of those things because I'm not going to
Right,
stop.
right.
So,
That and yeah, it's interesting. So I want to tie this back to the spirituality thing, if you
okay.
don't mind. So it's back to full circle, why I'm
Yeah.
here in Sudan. And one of the lessons that I've learned while I've been here is to find my voice, and that my voice is just as important as other people's voices. And instead of putting myself in a situation where I am agreeing with other people because that is their viewpoint of the world, I finally hit a point and thought, I'm in a place of unhappiness
Mm,
because I'm not finding my voice and standing up and saying, you know what? I love that that's what you believe in, but it's not what I believe in. So every time we have this conversation, I don't want it to be a battle that exists. I just want to be, or within myself mainly, I just want to be able to have enough courage to say to my friend, somebody, even if I don't know, maybe it's a professional in the space, that is that, you know what? No, not me, not me. And
yeah.
I want to be respected for that, as I need to respect them for their space. I may not agree with what they believe in. I may not agree in their practice, but it doesn't make them wrong. And
Right.
it doesn't make me right. And it doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make them wrong. It's just what it is. But finding my voice, and interestingly enough, I had developed this thing about being telepathic with my godson Lenny.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my godson Lenny that said to me the other day, he said, grow a fucking pair of balls and
Wow.
speak up. And it was like, and it had to do, it was a very personal thing. And I was like, holy shit, he's teaching me.
Right.
Now, he's the younger, he's much younger, all these other things, but basically he's teaching me through his nonverbal communication how to actually communicate, which is
Wow.
just astounding to me.
That's amazing.
So as I go and I'm here on this thing, and the past few days we've been with shaman, and we've done some spiritual things, and it's been really lovely. But I'm also able to now take a step back and say, no, don't want to be a part of that particular thing. Doesn't mean that I don't think that it's a wonderful thing for you to go through and for you to do, but I don't really need that in my life. Because also, here's the other part, Shawn. When I talk about being non-studied, when it's it's a couple of things. When it's too much information, and you know me well enough, I'm not a study person. I go by my gut, I go by my instinct, I go by what it feels like, and I make my decision based upon those things. And if I'm
I,
true to that,
I would disagree. I see you study video like music videos like nobody's business, but
oh well, that's creative art.
that's studying though. It's just your version.
Okay, good valid point. Um, but I what was that? My point? My point was that being studied about something. So what I
Right.
don't want to do is I don't want to be in a situation where it is so controlled by a a study in, again, we'll use Buddhism, for example.
Sure.
if I just stay in that space and go, I'm Buddhist and I'm Buddhist and this is what I'm going to do. What I found is that if I stay in there, then I'm limiting myself to this one belief system and one practice. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm open up to receive all kinds of different things. And one of the challenges that I found was that people who are in the Buddhist society, or any studied group, is if it's too contrived, then there's no room. There's no room for a varied viewpoint, a varied conversation. And so, like being an artist, as you applied this to earlier, and as you well know, one of the things that I have always done in my work as an artist was to not be studied. So, because if I studied it too much, then I set up the parameters of what you can do and what you can't do. So, if a painter, and I've had this conversation recently with a painting instructor who was teaching somebody that I know a technique. And I looked at the work that was being done based upon the instructor's technique, and I saw this artist who did beautiful, very in-depth work. It was gone.
Yeah.
The freedom of the artist was taken away and replaced with technique, and now this painting looked like every other fucking painting out there.
That's what this whole chapter is about.
How
an artist or a designer stagnates. But yeah, any framework, method, or label you impose on yourself is very likely to become a limitation.
Right.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So anyway, that's kind of where I am today, and there'll be more to share.
I look forward to it. I'm going to end it with this quote from Paul Graham, which I think is one of the most spiritual things ever said. And he's not a spiritual person. He's just a business guy. He said, the more labels you impose on yourself, the dumber you become. And again, not saying that to accuse anybody of being dumb. I just feel that that is a truth for me. And that's why I get very uncomfortable when I start labeling myself.
Right.
Without...
Absolutely. And Shawn, one more thing I want to talk about, because I want to be honest about something here. Ego. So the other day, and I shared it with you. You're the only person I shared it with until I posted it on Facebook. And then I shared it with everybody. So ego. So here I am. I'm here in Sedona. I'm in Whole Foods, and some guy comes up to me and like very like kind of timid and shy, and like says, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're here." I'm like, okay, I'm self-scanning my food at Whole Foods to check out. Right? I said, "Excuse me." He goes, "Aren't you Aubrey? What's Aubrey's last name? I already forgot.
Aubrey Marcus.
Aren't you Aubrey Marcus?" And I'm thinking, oh, well, he must be somebody famous. So all of a sudden my ego kicked in. My ego kicked in right in a split second, right? So I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy thinks that I am somebody. So my ego kicked in and I thought, oh, I've got to go look up this guy. But at the same time, I was saying to him, no, I didn't want him to mislead him and tell him that I was this person. I said, no, I said, absolutely not. But I knew the name Aubrey was somebody, right? So after like a good 30 seconds of me telling him, no, I'm not him like looking at me or kind of saying to me, you're being incognito.
Right.
And I went out to the car and I Googled Aubrey, his name. And I was like, oh my God, he's really hot. He's really good looking. And he's this podcast guy. Oh my God, I'm going to post this and I'm going to share this. So what did I do? I gave into my ego, and my ego was like, validation. Validation. You like somebody famous, and then he's good looking on top of that. So wow, you got a double stroke of validation there.
Even after his car accident where he smashed his nose in,
which is so sexy.
People love it. The millennials love him.
So I'm gonna go get into a car accident and just fuck up my nose so I can really look like Aubrey.
All right,
anyway,
Aubrey.
Okay.
I love you, and I'll see you sometime next week.
Okay, bye.
Have fun.